Last night. I've seen yours.
Can we go quiet in the room?
Well, don't come back next Friday and what you do there.
Yeah, okay, the deal.
Take care.
You're welcome. So,
We are live.
good morning. Today is Friday, February 23rd, 2024, it's 8:30 a.m. and the Lieutenant Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We're resuming our work on S-258, an act relating to the management of fish and wildlife. We are going to hear again today from roughly 30 folks. We're doing a hearing over the course of the week on the bill, and there's a lot of interest, so we're making sure that we can hear from a lot of people. For anyone who's interested in the topic and hasn't come in this week as a witness, we'll be voting next week. Please know that you can always submit written testimony to the committee. A copy goes to every member of the committee, and it also goes onto our website so the public at large can see what you want to share in the conversation that we're having. I'll start the same way I did yesterday, which is, the most important word, I think that's not in the bill, but an underlying premise of it is what I would say is respect. That is that there are different ways of enjoying the outdoors. The bill seeks not to put any one way of enjoying the outdoors, wildlife, over any other way. And I think part of what we saw yesterday was a lot of, just as I anticipate today, a lot of very civil, respectful conversation with people learning from each other. And I think that is the goal, keep on learning from each other, because there's more than one way of nature. So with that, we are going to get started, and we're asking people to speak for approximately 3 minutes. And that will help us, it's brief, but you can get a lot said in 3 minutes. And the reason we're doing that is make sure that we can have more people participate in the conversation. Oh, right. So our able committee assistant Judith Newman is reminding me, we don't really have a registration process when 60 people want to sign up. And so it's email by email. And we do our best to take them as they come and sort them. We're trying to hear basically from about there's basically two sort of sides, right? Yes and no on the bill. We're trying to hear from approximately an equal number of people so that we get balanced testimony. And with that, I'm going to read some names. I think some people are either not here or canceled, or we've had some sickness already this morning. But just so that people know they are or were on the list. The first up would be Justin Cornett. And I think Justin called in sick and is sending a substitute.
A substitute person or documents.
Person. So is Morgan Gold. Morgan, I'm sorry. I couldn't read the writing. Thank you. If you would join us at the table, you'll be first up. And again, we're aiming for roughly 3 minutes or so of testimony. Keep on going this morning. So one brief interruption on the job crew and on this crew. On Fridays, I want to say thank you. We had an extra meeting. There's old food on the table. In case you're getting ready to pass out, seek nourishment. All right, onward and upward. Thank you for coming, Mr. Gold.
Absolutely. So my name is Morgan Gold. I'm a farmer based in Peach, Vermont. I raise ducks, geese, cattle, trees, pigs. On about 160 acres in Peacham. There now over 5 years. Also, my farm, Full Shot Farm, has pretty sizable social media presence where about 4.5 million folks across various platforms follow what happens at the farm, and the ins and outs, and what goes on. And over the last few years, my farm's had some real struggles when it comes to interactions with hound hunting. In particular, probably the most vivid and worst experience was about 11:30 at night one night. Wake up in the middle of the night. In my dooryard is some folks I've never seen before with dogs running through. My livestock guardian dog, who helps keep kind of our predator control situation in check, was freaking out. My ducks and geese were freaking out. and there were raccoon hunters just kind of wandering through the property. A couple weeks later, I had a bear hound hunter show up, and you know, he treated the bear, and I wouldn't let him kind of kill it, but I went with him to get the dogs. So I've had that issue. I've had a number of issues with folks right on the border of our property, even though at this point fully posted. We still have had, even this past year, a situation where folks have crossed into our property. You know, again, 160 acres is hard to watch every second, but even as I have trail cameras up, I've had dogs cross through in pursuit. And so as I try to manage the farm in a way where I'm being very kind of balanced with the ecosystem, where I try to manage the number of animals I have on the farm, try to manage how we interact with predators, with a bobcat, coyote, bear, that sort of thing. We focus so much on kind of making sure we keep things in balance, yet I can't maintain that balance when I have hounds just cutting through the property on the regular, which does happen. The other thing that's happened, since I've become kind of a vocal advocate speaking about the practice, I've documented my experiences. Last fall, some folks actually shot flares into my barn, almost burned the barn down. And have a strong reason based on posts that we've seen on social media between hound hunters actually talking about going to pay me a visit, making sure my cameras were off, making sure that the hey, look, the fire emojis going off. And literally I have social media posts from a week before this happened that actually like it happened. So I gotta say, it's been very hard coexisting where to this day I still have hound hunters during season for bear driving by every single day, honking their horn at my house immediately as they drive by. And so the amount of harassment I've been under since I began talking about this issue publicly has just been quite untenable. I think the other thing is, and this actually gets to the foundation of where, as I look at the existing laws and why I think there needs to be changes, is if I'm trying to think about being responsible. I'm a hunter myself. I regularly hunt, I regularly have friends hunting, I follow the posting process. But none of this, particularly with the regulations related to hound hunting and pursuit and what happens there, gives me any protections or any confidence to say that I won't have folks showing up, crossing the border, going through, harassing my cattle, harassing my geese, like dealing with all these things from a livestock management perspective. There's no guarantees in any of the way any of the statutes are written today, nor how they're enforced. Nor as we think about control, like when I think about the rules regarding control of my livestock guarding dogs, right? Which I keep in a fence perimeter, electrical top wire. I'm responsible for those dogs. If those dogs get out, it's on me to be making sure that they're there. But meanwhile, a different type of dog with a different type of license can have state sanctioned carte blanche to be in pursuit of an animal and cross boundaries and borders, posted or not. And to me, that's the struggle. That's the core of it. It's not about protecting bears or doing anything silly or really. I'm not on that soapbox. What I'm really focused here is saying, how can I manage my land as a farmer, try to do it in balance with the ecosystem and the wildlife around it, when I can't even actually be offered any sort of measure of protection from invasive hounds. So I think it's just that my 3 minutes. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
and if anybody has questions about what I said, I got receipts, video footage, photos, a lot of things that I showed you. Gold shot farm for impeachment.
Thank you. Next up would be Pat Berry, but I understand Mr. Berry is sick this morning. So we'll go on to Beverly Soychek. Oh, yeah.
If you don't mind, I'm just gonna read from my phone, because I did it within the 3 minutes, and I wanted to make sure I got everything covered that I wanted to say without going off on a tangent, because that's what I do. So my name is Deb Slaychak, I'm from Moncton, Vermont. I am a born Vermonter, and I support hunting 100%, come from a hunting family. I support 258. I am not a member of any particular group, I'm just a Vermonter who is interested in the fair and humane treatment of our animals and representation on the Fish and Wildlife Board. I specifically work with beaver conflicts with towns and landowners, very successfully, I might add, and I work with Skip Wild, who is a Vermont-owned business, and he is the world expert in beaver water flow conflict issues. I only mention this so that you understand that wildlife has positive impacts on our environment, and these are being overlooked. This is why I have kind of a different perspective for you to consider. I believe that all Vermonters should have a say in stewardship of wildlife, and that different voices should be part of the board discussion, and that is not happening. Non-consumptive Vermonters should be able to enjoy their shared land, safety, and protect their property as well as their pets and livestock. This has been a challenge with both traffic and hounding practices. I have over 30 years of rescue and humane experience, and I have great concerns that of a lack of a dog when on a scent ever be controlled on any level. I also feel that these coyotes do have the ability to feel fear or terror, and it's a survival mechanism and it should not be exploited. We need consumptive Vermonters to ethically enjoy the bounty of Vermont's wildlife in a humane and safe way, and they also have to have a conscious respect for other Vermonters' beliefs and forms of enjoyment. One Vermonter's tradition should not supersede another's, especially non-consumptive recreation is a good thing for Vermont's economy. That is never discussed at a Vermont Fish and Wildlife meeting that I have ever been to. Both consumptive and non-consumptive Vermonters care about wildlife policies, and both groups should be able to participate in the Vermont Fish and Wildlife meeting. It is the time of inclusivity. This is not the 1800s anymore. Wildlife does have value for our environment and climate change mitigation, and we need to harness those values. I started attending a Vermont Fish and Wildlife meetings about a year ago. I never really knew about the board because unless you hunt, fish, and trap, you kind of let that communications move. I was very excited to attend the board meetings to share my knowledge and successes regarding my work with beavers. I also was one of 2 people present at that meeting that brought up harassment from hounders and trappers, so I did not feel so alone. I quickly saw the writing on the wall, and no one was really interested in talking to me because I don't hunt, fish, or trap. Who cares about climate benefits, flooding mitigation, and all these other things, but to me, they're key topics on Vermonters' voices. I do no longer attend Fish and Wildlife meetings because I did not feel safe at the last meeting I attended. The department did not manage the meeting properly when over 75 hounders and trappers showed up. I left the meeting after the 3rd interruption was finally addressed, but it was too much for me. I know that I'm going to face repercussions for speaking out today, as many Vermonters do. Many Vermonters are scared because of these behaviors, and that's not okay on any level. I want to be involved and participate, but if you don't hunt, fish, and trap, your labels as anti or eco-terrorist, which is certainly does not describe me. I consider myself to be a Vermont wildlife superhero. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you get in under your time?
Yes.
Next up is Doug DeVos. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for coming back.
So, my name is Doug DeVos. I'm a resident of Brownington. I grew up in Vermont my whole life. I have hounds, and I'm dead against 258. And I don't see how it doesn't make perfect common sense. We're taking away from the fish and wildlife and the biologists that live and breathe what we're making rules about. If they came to us and said, hey, we need to back off on whatever animal they're talking about, we would do it. Me personally, most of us would do it without a law. It doesn't make any sense to take away the science behind anything because you're not getting the answer that you're looking for. That's my opinion on that. If I can address some issues that this gentleman's had at his farm. I wish I'd known I could bring 10 farmers from up my way that beg us to come. The 2 major farms by us have 8,000 acres of corn. And they lose $20,000 to $40,000 a year. And there's no money in farming to begin with. They beg us they actually want us to take the animals completely out, and we just don't do that. Hounders aren't a problem, and the control, I've heard mention of the control. I'd be happy to show any one of you the control of my dogs. The last time I called my dogs in, they were almost 3/4 of a mile from me, and I had them at my feet within minutes. I have a friend that's in law enforcement, trains canines for a state. He'd be willing to talk to you. I talked to him this morning. They use the same GPS units to train their canines. And why would Garmin make multi-billion-dollar company? Why would they make these collars if they didn't work? It doesn't make any sense. I understand there's a bad egg in every group, but we shouldn't try to end hunting and fishing and trapping with a group of people that they just aren't going to be for it. That's my feelings on all matters. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a point of information for folks, so because we've heard it, and I just want to remind people what's in the bill. So the management of fish and wildlife is returned entirely to the department in terms of rulemaking. And it's very explicit that it has to be based on science, you know, that's peer reviewed science. So it's not, there's an advisory group that can offer information, but the requirements required to manage based on wildlife management, scientific wildlife management.
With that being said, all the biologists and the wardens, they're all for hounds, correct?
I don't know that.
That's not true.
It's like for your farm, if you had a bear or a coyote get in there and take your stock out, we could go there and help you. That animal is gonna come back because it's easy food.
Okay, so
No, see, that's
we're
not
not
in
gonna-
bounds, and that's my responsibility to manage,
Mr.
sir.
Gold, but thanks, we're not doing discussion around the room, I just wanted to share that, in case there was any confusion about how the 258, I just was trying to offer clarification, not to debate anyone. Okay, so with that, thank you, we'll go on to Mr. Rosinski, Alan Rosinski, see online, there he is. So
You're muted.
if you could turn on your microphone, we can't hear you yet.
There you go.
Okay. We're still not hearing your voice.
No,
Don't hear
he's muted again.
So I know that this is not entirely unusual. Let's keep trying.
He's unmuted. You should-
The other thing we can do is go on to another person, and I would suggest relinking to the website. Sometimes that corrects the sound issue. Because whether your mic is on or off, we can't hear you. Try one more time. Still can't hear you. Okay, so you're losing your turn. I would suggest that you log off and log back into the meeting, and sometimes that reset helps solve the sound problem. So we'll come back to you. Sorry that you're experiencing these technical difficulties.
And so if he accepts the audio, when he accepts the Zoom.
Judith's pointing out to me that when you sign in, you need to accept both audio and video as part of connecting. So that will be another thing to check when you log back in. Okay, so we'll go on, we'll look for you coming back, and we'll go on to John Abert. Is Mr. Abert in the room or with us online? Okay, I don't see
John,
if Mr. Abert is. Thanks, Mr. check in the hall. Okay, so we'll say Mr. Abert's spot, we'll go on to the next, which is Kirby. Spade,
Sprague. He's on.
Spray,
Yeah, he's.
and. I don't see a Kirby Spade online. Clearly not in the room. Running in for the.
Yeah. He's also.
Spade of missing parties. All right,
So she didn't take any.
next on the list is David Bard.
Yes.
It's John.
Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Oh, sure.
And if you can introduce yourself and say your town, red comments.
My name is David Bardis, my town is Lincoln. And thank you all for hearing my testimony. I'm in support of 258. I have always been just opposed to trapping and hounding, but it really got personal for me in Christmas Day of 2020, my wife and I were walking in Bristol Cliffs Wilderness, and our beloved dog was caught in a body kill trap. And I mean, we are dog people, we love this dog. My wife, I think, loves me less than the dog, but this was a very traumatic thing, and it really brought home to me the danger, the danger that's there. This was on a well-traveled trail. It was about 20 feet from that trail. And it makes me think, God forbid, if it had been a child, it could have very easily happened. I was able to wrench this trap off of my dog's head, which then closed on my fingers. And luckily I had a pair of leather gloves on, but I still extracted my fingers from this trap. You know, I was left bruised and bloody, and it was just traumatic all the way around. And it really hit home the dangers of this trapping. This trap was not marked. Dale Whitlock.
Do you mind if you, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Jude, I think Mr. Rosaline has unmuted again, and that's the ringing noise. Yeah, I know.
Not at all.
Continue, sorry.
So I guess 258, of course, doesn't particularly pertain to traffic, but it does, you know, the section on hounding is compelling for me, because I think it's dangerous as well. I think it poses a threat to companion animals, to livestock, and to people's property. And I in learning about a little bit about Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and the fact that its board is not necessarily representational of, you know, a cross section of the general population of Vermont. I do support the idea that it become an advisory board to the department itself, and then it be staffed in a more equitable way. And then this idea of decisions being based on as much science as possible makes total sense to me. So I'm wholeheartedly a supporter of 250. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Did you say your name again?
David Barnes, B. Yes.
And you're from Bristol?
Lincoln.
Oh,
Yeah, there is a provision that addresses the trapping insofar as if there's a trail setback 50 feet, which
Yes.
was previously not.
This wasn't observed in this particular case, and nor was there any flag or you know, it wasn't marked anywhere.
the bill has that now.
Yeah, right.
It does
I
not.
think it's a great thing. Yeah,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
Gonna go on to Jane Fitzwilliam.
She's on the screen.
Who is,
Hi, good morning. This is Jane. Can you hear me?
yes, thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jane Fitzwilliam. I'm the lead at Vermont Coyote Coexistence Coalition, and I'm in support of Act 258. I participated in the working group on coyote hounding representing my group, and our supporters, and while the commissioner can say he invited us, Protect Our Wildlife and other organizations, it doesn't mean that we were truly heard. We find it disingenuous for the commissioner to invite groups like ours to working groups for the sole purpose of being able to say that he did. Let me give you one example that should have been low-hanging fruit. We recommended that bait piles be prohibited for coyote hounding, and there seemed to be some agreement in that group. And we left the meeting believing that baiting was going to be banned, only to find out later that Fish and Wildlife added it back in to the recommendation after the meeting adjourned, and they did not notify us. This is an example of exactly the kinds of political pandering we witnessed throughout this whole process. The department and board have had ample opportunities to prove to the legislature that they are serious about allowing diverse voices, but they just don't do it. Same goes to regulating coyote hounding. They had a chance to keep the practice legal, but they ignored LCAR's warning and continued to consider GPS and shock collars on a pack of hounds a method of control despite the hunter being a mile or more away from the dogs who are on a scent. Bill 258, S258 comes at a crucial time, and it is not about eliminating ethical hunting. If we don't make these foundational changes now, conservation will suffer and the board will become even more defiant. I find it ironic that democracy was mentioned yesterday relative to the governor and the board. The board is appointed and operates independently and disregards the wishes of the majority of Vermonters. It is the antithesis of democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gonna double back and see, I have a name on my list that doesn't match spelling on your name. So Mr. Don Rosinsley. Okay, so your microphone is muted on our screen. I don't know if you can flip that off on your end. Okay, let's try again. No, we still can't hear your voice. Have you connected to a Zoom meeting before?
Yeah, he's actually making the.
Problems? I was wondering if there's something in your setup.
On the computer.
Good thing we started early, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just to account for legit.
Hiccups are not unusual,
I'm going upstairs.
Right.
Love this customer.
although usually they get resolved by disconnecting and reconnecting. So, I'm sorry to say we still cannot hear you. I don't know if there's anything you can mess around with, disconnect and reconnect. Look at your settings for microphone, audio, control panel.
Sound up.
13-year-old.
Yeah. So with regrets, we're gonna go on to other witnesses and we'll keep an eye out for you and try again. If the electronic connection doesn't work out, please do submit written testimony. I know people we'd rather, have people in person or on Zoom, but your written testimony will be read by everyone in the committee as well as posted on the website. So we will keep an eye out for you and hope it works out. Let me just double back to other people who were missing when I called their name. John Ebert. Kirby Sprague. Okay. And that brings us forward to Rob Boudreau.
Am I allowed in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rob Boudreau, I see your tile up on the screen. It is your turn. Mr. Boudreau, I don't know if you hear us, but it's your turn to provide some remarks to the committee.
He's muted.
He's there, but he's got his video and microphone off.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go on, Mr. Boudreau, if when you're ready to go, please turn your video on.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
All right.
On to mute before they, hi, I still don't you, thank you, dude.
Mr. Boudreau, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak and voice my opinion today. Just so you know, I live in Guilford, Vermont, Windham County. I'm 61 years old. I'm a native of Vermont. I've hunted here in this state in this area. It's been a way of life for my family. I am against the bill S258, opposed to this bill. I just wanted everybody to know, I was in the State House on Tuesday, on the 20th. I spoke with a number of, am I still on? Yes.
Yes, you are.
I spoke with a number of legislators. I even spoke with legislators from my area, Sarah Coffey, Nader Hashim, and a number of others there at the State House. And I was surprised when I brought up the coyote hunting. You know, why is coyote hunting being completely eliminated with hounds? It was like people just, they didn't know what to say to me. And I was surprised. I was surprised because I can't understand why it's completely eliminated. So you know, coyote hunting, I'm afraid that coyote hunting, you know, it's been around for many years, and to completely stop it is very concerning to me. I mean, I understand and I hear, you know, the other folks here and the problems that I coyote hunt with folks in southern Vermont and in the middle of the state. We have total control of those dogs. I don't know what the problem is in the other counties. The bill also discusses deer herd, but it doesn't discuss anything about coyote management. If you completely eliminate the coyote hunting with dogs, what's going to happen? You know, a couple of years ago, a bill went through to change the coyote hunting with dogs. It pretty much eliminated the sport. I mean, it was devastating to these guys. You know, and I witnessed it firsthand for these guys that spent so much time, so much effort, so much money into the sport, and to have it completely just pulled right out from under them. Now I brought it back, and now you're trying to do away with it again. So these guys are very confused about this, and I'm confused. So I'm concerned that, you know, if the bill passes, what's next? You know, here trapping, you know, is it bear hunting, hunting bear with dogs or rabbits with dogs, deer hunting? What's next? You know, I guess, you know, I'm concerned about that, being a hunter. You know, keep in mind that completely eliminating coyote hunting will have an adverse effect on other wildlife in the state. And as the population increases, which it will increase, because there's no other, you know, don't have any predators except for humans. So as they increase, the deer herd and others will decrease. And because they have no other predators except for humans, they will start to be more aggressive, and they will work their way into farms and other domestic animals. You know, and we've had issues right here in Windham County where people have gotten attacked by coyotes in the last couple of years because there's no coyote. And people have been attacked that have had dogs and are on trails with dogs. So I'm very concerned of that. You know, it's just, you know, whole coyote hunting thing, but these people that walk their dogs, you know, and I have neighbors here that are like that, and we have coyotes right in our yard. So I'm concerned of that. You know, I guess with that said, I'm concerned about the future of hunting and fishing in the state. And will my, you know, children and grandchildren continue to hunt? Will they have a chance to sport? You know, so I ask you to please reconsider the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Boudreau. Point of clarification. So coyote hunting is not ended. Coyote hunting with hounds is ended. There's been a moratorium for 2 years. And then the bill goes in essence to make that moratorium a permanent moratorium. Okay, thank you very much. Going to double back, I see John Abert has joined us. So doubling back, good morning to you, sir. The floor is yours. I don't know if you heard what we're up to. We're asking people to speak for roughly 3 minutes and share what's on their minds about 258.
Do I have the floor?
Yes, you do, sir.
Okay, I'm a licensed wildlife rehabilitator here in Roxbury, and I specialize in coyotes as one of the animals I specialize in. I'd just like to speak to the two parts of 258. The first part is, I believe, about the Fish and Wildlife Board and the composition of the board. Back in 2018, there was a vacancy here in Washington County for a seat on the board, and I applied for it along with others, and I never received any acknowledgement of my application from the governor's office. You know, the governor actually came here in October of that year for the reconstruction dedication of the Roxbury Fish Hatchery. And I met him in person and introduced myself. But it turned out that the governor appointed someone who didn't even apply for the position. So I think there really needs to be a diversity of membership on the board, both non-consumptive, what are called non-consumptive as well as consumptive. At the moment, it's just hunters and trappers, and they represent, trappers represent 0.04% of Vermont's population. Hunters about 11% of Vermont's population. So that's really not representative of our community. The second part of 258 I wanted to address was the ban on coyote hunting, I believe. And I also have some personal experience with that. You know, many years ago, a bear hound came onto our property and was there for 8 hours. And, you know, we called the game warden, we called the Humane Society, we called the state police. No one could do anything. You know, GPS collar does not mean there is control over these hounds. The owner was miles away and no one could get in touch with him. So there's a real problem with, you know, private property rights with these dogs running loose. Large hounds running loose over the lands. Also, you know, hounding is very detrimental to wildlife. I know that from personal experience because back in 2014, I got in a coyote pup that had been mauled by a bear hound or a coyote hound, I guess. And there were bite marks on his hind quarters where he was shook and broke his spine. And we had to euthanize the pup. And, you know, it's just very cruel to let these hounds run loose, especially beginning in June when there's the, you know, hounding training season. And, you know, the coyotes give birth to pups at the beginning of May or end of April. So they're only a month old and they're very vulnerable. And, you know, this is just, you know, there's so much collateral damage to wildlife with these hounds running loose over the landscape. And, you know, I think it's also very cruel, especially when, you know, Vermonters can hunt coyotes in a normal way without using these dogs. So, you know, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in this morning. We're going to, the third time might be the charm. Mr. The print is so small, I'm having trouble. Rosinsley. Are you Don Rosinsley? Want to try to unmute and see if it works this time? All right, there's the unmuting. Hallelujah. All right, this time we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, God.
Thanks for being. Thanks for being.
During COVID, I've done these things and it's like, it's been hell trying to get through. But anyways, start right off. I'm opposed to 258 in its entirety. I think that we have a compilation of people between the board and the department that have accomplished some great things over the last 63 years. You know, they're responsible for many things that I can't bring up or think of at this moment. The only thing that pops in my head is the wild turkey restoration, which was done several years, a long time ago now. It seems, at my age, it seems like yesterday. But I want to state that all of this wildlife improvement, habitat improvement, land acquisition, in all of it has been paid for in the beginning, especially by hunters, trappers, and fishermen. And now we have, in the last several years, where there's a proliferation of all these protect the wolves, protect our wildlife, even the grandpapa of them all, the PETA organization. This bill has an end run. It doesn't want to improve the wildlife. These organizations have big money behind it. What they're doing is putting the money to one place, and that is to fight to end hunting, trapping as we know it. And if you want to see what the results are to ending coyote trapping, just look south of the border in Massachusetts, where they have them in the cities and literally sitting on the road waiting for somebody to throw some trash out their window. The overabundance of coyotes and their lack of fear is because they're not pursued. And I think the actual crust of this whole thing is these groups want to infiltrate the lawmaking portion of our wildlife management that we have now, which has worked fine, like I said, for 63 years. I'm always of the mind, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it ain't not broke. Regardless of what everybody else is saying about having more representation there, the representation that we've had comes with a price, and we have paid it, and we continue to pay it. And I think that anybody that thinks you can get two opposites that we have now, especially how vehement the anti-hunting, trapping folks, hounding folks are, as vehemently as they attack this thing, there's no way you're going to meld the two together on any kind of a board. Another one point of interest, they're talking about 12 board members. That's no longer the case. Right now we have 14. Every county should have a representative to have a voice. The people on the board are, yes, hunters, fishermen, trappers perhaps, but these people have on the ground information, on the ground, in person things happening. We've heard of several incremental incidents that have happened, unfortunate ones, but the Fish and Wildlife Board has always been trying to compensate and make better the trapping methods, getting traps further away from trails so that people's dogs don't get in them. I think now they're got to be 50 feet away from the trails. If we don't control these animals, I can guarantee you will see. Right now you have people that are controlling them and they're paying to control them. Whereas if we stop it, you're going to pay to control. Just look over the border in Massachusetts. They have an excellent article on the Mass Wildlife magazine about coyotes and how they've gotten here. If you want to be honest about it, a coyote is actually invasive. They came from the West. They were not here originally. So, and they'll never be exterminated. I'm sorry that they have some issues with trapping, but nothing is going to be perfect. But at this point in time, I've heard nobody come up with an answer. How are we going to replace the services that are being done unintentionally by trappers and hunters to help control wildlife populations in the state? And with that, I think I've pretty much covered what I wanted to say.
Okay, and Mr. Rosins, what town are you from, please? What town are you from, please?
I live in Vernon, down in Windham County.
Thank
I
you.
was up at the State House the other day and managed to get in touch with a couple of my reps that I bumped into. And one of my senators, I sat down, I actually gave her a copy of the Mass Wildlife magazine. And it's not It's not a pro, it's not anti, it's just information, solid information on how coyotes got here and what the state of it is now with them being everywhere. We're never going to eliminate it. We're never going to eliminate coyotes, and we never intended to. Our intention is to keep things in smart conditions.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony. And just as a clarification, in case as other people are listening, the bill doesn't, in coyote hunting, it ends coyote hunting with hounds, and it doesn't, in trapping, it does specify setbacks on public way. With that, thank you again, and we'll, next on our, I'm gonna check again to see if Kirby Sprague has appeared one way or the other. All right, keep going. And next up then is Murray Heitman. Good morning, Mr. Heitman. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill. My name is Mario Heitman. I am a student at Vermont Law and Graduate School in the Master's Animal Protection Policy Program, and I currently live in South Royalton. I am interested in wildlife policy, which is the focus of my degree, and I'm also a lover of the outdoors, with wildlife photography being a longtime passion of mine. I support S258 and appreciate this committee's attention and thoughtfulness on the bill over the last week. I'd like to focus on the coyote hounding and baiting aspects of the bill, but I'm certainly supportive of the suggested changes to the Fish and Wildlife Board. As de facto top predators, coyotes provide a valuable service to Vermont ecosystems. They keep prey animals in populations in check to prevent overpopulation. They also help control the spread of diseases by controlling rodent populations and, by extension, rodent-borne diseases. Through their hunting of rodents, they can also minimize damages to crops that farmers may face. Coyotes also clear up carcasses that are left behind that otherwise would be left to rot and fulfill the critical ecosystem function of a scavenger. They compete and occasionally prey on other smaller predators such as foxes and raccoons, and by doing so, increase bird diversity as well as keeping bird populations at healthy levels. By doing their jobs, coyotes help fulfill their end of the predator-prey cycle, which, if left undisturbed, will keep both predator and prey populations at healthy levels. Coyotes keep our environment clean and healthy. How do we repay them for this service? By harassing them and terrorizing them with dogs until they're on their last legs. And to address an earlier concern, coyotes are in cities because human expansion is moving into their territories, not just because of the lack of hunting. Coyote hunting season is year-round here in Vermont already, so why should we allow an additional method of killing that is even more violent? The Fish and Wildlife Department itself has stated, quote, coyotes can increase the reproductive rates in response to hunting, so populations rebound quickly from efforts to control their numbers directly by hunting or trapping, end quote. So what is coyote hounding really doing aside from terrorizing the wildlife to keep Vermont beautiful? There's no evidence that coyote hounding helps game species either, as coyotes hunt a large variety of prey and don't focus on just one species. Studies in Colorado and Idaho have shown that killing of native carnivores does not lead to growth in deer populations. If no scientific evidence has been provided to support coyote hounding, then why should it be allowed? Coyote hunting contests, which themselves have no basis in science, have been banned. So coyote hounding, which has no basis in science, should also be banned. While everyone will have their own personal opinion on coyotes, everyone should agree that they are still living beings that can feel pain and suffering. Extremely different from ordinary hunting, coyote hounding prolongs the death of coyotes by being hunted. By being chased for miles, slowly worn down, and eventually killed in a drawn-out manner, coyotes will suffer an unimaginable fate. Is that any way to treat the wildlife that lives around us? Is that any way to appreciate the natural beauty Vermont has to offer? I fully and wholeheartedly support and agree with S258 and support any attempts to ban the hunting of coyotes with dogs. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next up is Will Stats. And he is joining us online, Mr. Stats. I'm hoping you hear me. There goes your microphone on.
You hear me?
We can. Success. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I'm Will Stats from Victory, Vermont. I'm a wildlife biologist with 40 years experience working in the field of wildlife management and conservation, still active in the field. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. And those of us that will be most directly impacted by S258, and that's our wildlife professionals in the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, as well as the thousands of Vermont hunters and trappers who buy licenses in the state. With all due respect to the chairman, this bill has the fingerprints of the anti-hunter groups all over it. Let's be clear, this bill only drives a wedge further between those Vermonters who choose to hunt and those who don't, and I believe contributes to a toxic climate among these competing user groups. Just Tuesday, a coyote hunter, hound hunter, was almost in tears describing to Senator Bray how he has been recently followed and filmed without his permission while hunting his coyote hounds. This is a sad but predictable pattern of harassment that has been used in other states. What's additionally alarming to me is that our own department employees continue to be subjected to constant barrage of onerous and unreasonable requests by the anti-hunting groups. Biologists are vilified and disparaged, and their jobs are threatened. While these department employees are struggling to respond to these never-ending requests for information by anti-hunting groups, these department employees have really little time to do the real job of wildlife management and protection. Now, I could talk about all the different parts of this bill for far beyond 4 minutes, but what I really would hope is that these wildlife advocacy groups would abandon these divisive tactics and join with hunters and trappers and other concerned Vermonters and help to create an even more effective voice for the protection of wildlife habitat in the last wildlife places that we have. So I'd like to tell just a couple of quick stories here, if I may, and just to sort of touch upon what this all means to us. Several weeks ago, I was hunting a large remote swamp in the Northeast Kingdom. I'm not a coyote hunter or trapper, by the way. It was a clear, cold day, and the mountains sparkled with fresh snow. My dogs took a fresh bobcat track and began trailing north, and I stood listening to their sweet voices telling me how fresh it was and where it was headed. They trailed this big cat for about 30 minutes, nearly out of hearing, before my GPS tracking unit indicated they were stopped and treed high on a mountain. I drove to the end of a road, strapped on my snowshoes, and began the hike of about 1.5 miles to where they were. When I finally heaved my old bones up the steep mountain to the dogs, I looked up to see a beautiful large bobcat perched on a beech limb, staring down at the 2 dogs and sweaty me far below. The dogs were fine, I was fine, and the cat was fine. I knew this cat. We had met in similar circumstances several years before. I praised my dogs, took some pictures, leashed them up, glanced one more time up towards the cat, and said goodbye to him and turned down the mountain. But then I stopped and paused for a moment, thinking to myself how I was part of something much bigger here, that hunters and their dogs have been doing this for thousands of years in one form or another. A culture of dogs and hunters that can be traced to the Inuit in the Arctic, pursuing the great white bear with their sled dogs, to possum hunters in the deep south. And then I remembered at that moment that people far away who had no concept of what I was doing nor valued the culture I was a part of wanted to take moments like this away from future generations of hunters like me. And with this realization, I went from elation to a moment of severe depression. Have I got a little more time?
Yes, a little bit.
I want to tell you one very, very personal story that I've never shared with anybody, and this is going to be very difficult for me. Like far too many Vermonters, my 25-year-old daughter has struggled with opioid addiction. I'm happy to say she has been sober for a while now and doing well. During the years that we dealt with this crisis, I went to many dark places, both physically and mentally. With the support of my wife, son, and extended family, we somehow managed to survive one long day at a time. During these bleak days that included late-night phone calls, trips to the ER, police stations, and rehab clinics, and gut-wrenching, hopeless searches on lonely back roads, one of the very few things that brought me occasional, real, palpable joy, however momentary, were my beloved hunting dogs. The days I spent hunting with my hounds deep in the swamps and on the mountains of the Northeast Kingdom during these dark years brought me brief moments of solace and allowed me to lift for a short while what was an almost unbearable burden from my shoulders. It would not be a stretch to say that my dogs played a role in keeping me alive during these challenging times. They still do. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Stats, and thank you for sharing that story. Of course, we all wish your family and especially your daughter well.
Thank you.
Continue better health.
Thank you.
I also just want to respond to one of the things you said before that, the bill, I think, agrees with. We talked in here and trying to set a stage for respectful dialogue between parties. And I appreciate your note that there's what I see from hundreds and hundreds of conversations and thousands of emails. There's a strong shared interest in wildlife. And so I hope that can come to bring people together. And the last thing I'll say, sorry, a little more talking than I should be making, is vilification of the other side is destructive. And unfortunately, it goes both ways. And happily enough, I think it's a relative minority on either side that engages in it. And I hope people will cease and desist on that side. So with that, we'll go on to the next person on the list, which is Ann Smith.
Right here.
It's shocking, someone in the room. Okay, here we go.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you could just introduce yourself and say where you're from, please.
Annie Smith, I'm from Westminster. Okay, when I first moved up here into Vermont in 2006, I was very excited to be here, a place I had dreamed of living. The first thing I did was ask somebody, where do I register my gun? And I was told very explicitly, we don't have any gun laws up here. And then I realized very shortly, and you're not in Kansas anymore, this is a different place. Shortly afterward, I joined an animal advocates group and I became a vegan. But then I found out about the hunting practices that still were going on in Vermont that were completely unheard of where I had come from. So it stopped me in my tracks. I was saddened and frankly very shocked that a seemingly progressive state was still in some ways locked in the past and not in a good way. I thought of moving like I had heard other newcomers had done, but then I thought, well, maybe that's why I'm here. So I ended up staying to help change things. And so here I am. I couldn't just abandon the animals. They needed all the help they could get. I started attending Fish and Wildlife board meetings and soon found out animal advocates were just barely tolerated. Sure, we always had our 2 minutes to speak, but it always fell on deaf ears. No acknowledgement of what you had said or asked for. No questions, they just continued on with their own agenda. Their agenda was always self-serving in that it all boiled down to how many animals can we kill. Even during discussions on how hard it hit the moose population was faring because of the winter tick problem, the solution seemed very clear to the board that we just kill more moose. The hardest times were when petitions were presented to the board. Lots of time and effort, research goes into each and every one. And asks very little in return. Wasn't it fair to ask mother bears not be killed when they have cubs? Wasn't it fair to stop coyote hunting 365 days a year? Well, apparently it was too much to ask, as we heard petitions denied over and over and over again. One waiting over a year to be told it was denied. It seemed like they had no humanity at all. Now, even as a novice, I know that every living creature has a purpose in life to keep our biology in balance. Knowing that fact alone would make me more qualified to be on the new advisory only Fish and Wildlife Board. The Fish and Wildlife Department have the knowledge as to what purpose each animal has, so let them be the final say using science. I indeed support 258 in this process of appointing a Fish and Wildlife Advisory Board. It will be taken out of the dark back room it has been for so long. Thank you.
Thank you. We are gonna pause now, to have our counsel, Michael Grady, join us at the table. We had scheduled time in case we had edits we wanted to make from the bill. Let's say at this point, we have some draft edits, so we're not gonna, I don't think more, but I'd ask if we could get some information. There was a question about a section in the bill that we referred to the language in VSA 4048 for the commissioner wildlife management plan. And when Mr. Austin was in with the commissioner, he held an action plan, but I think he said that was in response to a federal program. So I was just trying to make sure that what we were asking for was clear and distinct from what Mr. Austin was showing. Can you help us with some information on what that report is that statute requires the commissioner to produce on a 5-year basis?
So can I start with what the plan that
Sure.
Mr. Austin showed you is? So the federal government has a funding grant program that is, it is largely evolved to be one of the major tools for preserving and conserving threatened or endangered species. And in order to qualify for those federal grants, states need to develop what's called an action plan to lay out how they will address the needs, conservation of threatened and endangered species in their state. And the plan, the action plan, it's 1,500 pages long, so I can't say that I've read it, I haven't. But I have tried to search it for key terms. Non-game is used in those 1,500 pages.
I'm gonna get
55 times. And 43 of them relate to a reference to the Non-Game Wildlife Fund for the purposes of meeting one of the objectives for when you're addressing the needs of a threatened or endangered species. So
You tried it.
there's very little in it that is specific to the directive that is in statute for what the Non-Game Wildlife Plan will address. With that said, many of the threatened and endangered species that are in Vermont are non-game. So there, and the action plan does provide strategies and resources and funding for how to preserve and conserve them. So to an extent, yeah, the action plan does achieve some of what is required under 48D, but only for those species of greatest conservation need.
And were you able to find, I inquired of
I have not been able to
lawyer, but I don't believe I've received a reply.
I do think they have likely issued a non-game wildlife plan in the past, but it was probably long ago. So that's another distinction between the federal action plan and the state non-game wildlife plan. The state plan is supposed to, it's not supposed to be reissued every 5 years. It's supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, and there's supposed to be public hearings related to that review. I have not been able to find any evidence of any reviews or hearings on review. Whereas the federal action plan is required to be amended every 10 years. So the first one was 2005, the second one was 2015. They should be preparing one now. But again, it's only so that they can qualify for the federal funds. And it's only to address those species of greatest conservation.
There was, the cross-reference we have in the bill was this CVR 12-010-028, non-game wildlife management rule. It's 2 pages and it has effective dates of 1988 and 1997. I don't know if that indicates that the last time it was revised was 1997.
And usually that is probably amendment history or the. If it's a statute, it's legislative history. And that really just indicates the last time it was amended.
So, if you could, on behalf of the committee, reach out to, the department, yes, and see if maybe they have information that they did the 40 plan, and we're just unaware of it, haven't seen it posted, I don't know that. But I haven't got a confirmation for one way or the other, whether it exists or all this kind of person. Okay. The other thing I asked that came up as a question was in the bill, it referred specific language. In terms of what is brought before the new board, it's so page 2, line 3, says that. Well, I'll just read the whole sentence, not very long. The purpose of the board shall be to serve in an advisory capacity to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and establishment of department policy and rules. And Mr. Ross, it's a concern that that would sweep in too much of their work and require them to present it to the board. And I think he was bringing that big wildlife action plan binder in part to highlight how much policy there was, and that it would be burdensome to have to bring that all before the board. So we're not, of course, looking to create a manageable, workable process. Can you help us? And then I wrote to you about that, and you were helping clarify what you thought this language would entail.
Yeah.
So I think the requirement to engage the board right now is about rulemaking. It doesn't say when the agency is proposing policy that they shall submit the policy to the board for review and recommendations. Doesn't say that if the department does not agree with the recommendations of the board on policy, so it says on rule, it's about rule. Now, I understand the department's concern on page 2. You could clarify that rules are policy. And policy is not always relevant. So there are ways to clarify that.
Okay, I don't want to ask you to ad lib unless you thought about it and say, well, you have a useful suggestion, or we could ask you to think about it and propose language back. We need.
Well, remember, this is an advisory board. The department could engage with the board on recommendations on policy at its discretion.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was the section that I most felt that we should be responsive to, because when I signed on to the bill, my understanding was that it wasn't to open up the entire department to be reviewed by an advisory board. And that seemed to be what the department felt the bill was doing. While I think there could be a discussion on whether or not that's an accurate interpretation, that's one thing. But I just want to understand, even if we kept it exactly as it's listed, which I think actually doesn't open it up for them to be fully reviewed by this board. Why is there any way that should we add that there is discretion on part of the department? It's already assumed.
Well,
and isn't it that the board itself would only be reviewing the policies related to hunting and fishing? Like they're not looking at all the policies. They'd only be, my only concern is if we take this out, we're then opening it up so that they aren't able to do the things that they need to do as it relates to reviewing hunting and fishing policy.
So, yeah, a lot of questions.
I know, I'm trying, I wanna make sure we don't overburden the department, and I can't tell if the language does or does not based on the characterization.
So first I wanna like step back and say, I can understand the department's concern and their anxiety, because when you look at models of fish and wildlife boards, often they're called commissions around the nation, many of them are advisory, and many of them have kind of supervisory control over the department. Some of them even appoint the commissioner for the relevant department or agency. So the department, obviously being part of those associations, the state fish and wildlife associations, they know how other states work, and they're like, oh boy, are we gonna be moving to that kind of a model? And so I can understand their anxiety with when there's races of that kind, and you could clarify or address that anxiety by being maybe clear and all that, which as to what the board has authority over, that's your discretion.
Oh.
You're the ultimate policymaker. The board does not exist except that you created the board. The department does not exist except that you created the department. They are not constitutional entities, so things that the legislature created. You can charge them how you want. It's my interpretation that the board has authority right now over all wildlife and their conservation. It's not just something convention.
Okay, so it's, okay.
Now, there are these things called the commissioner's rules that are separate. And for example, for an endangered species, it's directed for the secretary to adopt those rules, but the commissioner is often the one that is the person that actually does that. And for wildlife, well, that's not a board rule, that's a commissioner. The red list, green list. It's what's allowed in autonomy. I see the engagement of the department with the board right now being about rules. And most of the rules that have been offered in the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 years have been board rules regarding hunting, fishing, or trafficking.
Oh, I see.
There have been only a few commissioners. So the workload, I think, in my opinion, if you look at it, if you're trying to gauge what the workload is, what the workload has been for the board in rulemaking over the past 10 to 15. And believe me, I know, because I have to read all those rules.
Thank you, that helps address my concern, and I actually appreciate the way that you have reframed it for me, which is what I had heard from the department was they believe the board is narrowly focused on hunting and fishing as it is, and that we would be changing it, versus your description is that they have that broader authority now, it's just they haven't necessarily been using it through the rulemaking process. Is that the right interpretation of what you're saying?
I would let's just go to the creation.
And we also haven't quite heard a mission. I've had someone send me what is on the website for what the board's statements and purposes. But I haven't confirmed or denied if that is what they use, or if that's something that's just kind of a descriptor on the website to give people an understanding of what the board does. So that's another point of clarity that I feel like we have. It seems like the Fish and Wildlife Board is a little bit like a prism, depending on where you're standing and looking at it, it does different things. And I think that would also help our discussion to reflect what.
The green books are not actually are pretty brief. They're not, it's not a long write-up in terms of, we have a portion of it in our bill, looking at the green books would help, you'll see what's above and below what we've edited.
So I can actually take you from policy to the commissioner to the board.
Right.
So in ten VSA 4081. The statute provides that wildlife, fish and wildlife are held in trust by the state for the benefit of citizens of Vermont. And that the state in the sovereign capacity shall have ownership, jurisdiction, and control of all fish and wildlife. It then goes on to say the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife shall manage and regulate the fish and wildlife of Vermont in accordance with the requirements of this part and the rules of the Fish and Wildlife. So the commissioner has to manage fish and wildlife according to your statutory requirements and the rules of the Fish and Wildlife. And then the protection, propagation, control, and conservation of fish and wildlife in the state by the interest of public welfare, the state through the commissioner shall safeguard the fish and wildlife and fur bearing elements of the state of the people of the state shall fulfill this duty with, I love this, a constant and continual vigilance. So that's the policy, that's the entity, the commissioner that has the authority you've given them, because it's your authority. You've said that they're held in trust, and when things are held in trust, guess what? You're the people that hold them in trust. And then you delegate that authority to others because you don't have the capacity or necessarily the desire to do it on a day-to-day basis.
Knowledge.
Rabbi,
But then you go to the board. And the board is created and empowered in a couple of different places. In one place, it's just the creation of the board and its membership. There is hereby established a Department of Fish and Wildlife, and there is hereby established a Fish and Wildlife Board, and it goes through how the board is created and the membership of it, et cetera, et cetera. It's partly in your bill because you're partly amending that. But then there's their specific authority to adopt regulation. I think I have a different opinion about what this language says than what you may have heard from the department. Does the board may adopt rules to be known as the Fish and Wildlife Regulations for the regulation of fish and wild game and the taking thereof, except as otherwise specifically provided by law. So it's first that they will regulate fish and game. All right, so game, wild, right, those are things that are subject to hunting, and this is the taking thereof. So I can see how the department, that's authority just for taking. But the next sentence says the rules shall be designed to maintain the best health, population, and utilization of the regulated species. All right, let's just assume that's game. And of other necessary or desirable species that are ecologically related to the regulated species. So that is not game. So,
yeah,
right, and so they have authority that goes beyond game. Fish and game. They have authority over other necessary or desirable species that are ecologically related to the regulated species.
Ecologically related.
Yeah.
They have something to do with one another.
Right. So think of a rule like the bait fish rule. Right? It's ecologically related to fish that is subject to taking. But it's not about the taking. And so it is to an extent. You can still take bait fish. But it's about how they're used. You know, you can't transport them.
It's like in
species
protection.
Right.
And that's for all species in the lake, not just the one yard fish.
And then it goes on to say things like the board may adopt rules relating to the management of migratory game.
yeah.
But that's there because the feds required.
And they have their whole group that does that,
Yeah, desire of their species. There's some debate, I think, about whether or not coyotes are desirable.
Well, it says regulate. So it's and other necessary desirable species that are ecologically related to the regulated species. coyote is a fur-bearing animal, it's a regulated species. So,
What's the section there?
10 VSA 4082. So I understand the department's point, there is a sentence that seems very limited to the taking efficiently. But then there's the next sentence that is, that it broadens that authority to go to those species that are related to those regulated species. And so it's not just about taking, they have authority right now beyond taking.
And I think part of what we're talking about in the bill is game and non-game and their habitats, because it, in the natural world, it's all one thing. It's not two different.
Thank you.
Like,
This is extremely helpful for me because as I noted before, it does seem like there are varying degrees of understanding of the role of the board as it stands now, and how to participate with the board is not clear for folks. So I'm wondering, in this new description that we have with policy and rules, I'm wondering if we can add anything that, I know you talked about directing council to do this, but when you're doing that, could we put in language that kind of eases the anxiety of the department? And could we also, I mean, is there a way to call out the need for clarification on the role of the board? Like, can we ask them to, it just feels like, I don't know if they will, when reconstituted, still have the same confusion about their role. Or if we need to more clearly spell out what.
well, since it seems to be overlooked, I don't think we quote 4082 in the bill, do we?
Okay.
So if 4082 perhaps with language that makes it more explicit were included and amended, then it might help people realize it was always there. So
Yeah.
now it's easier to see that kind of question.
Well, 4082 is referenced, but it's in a conforming revision.
Yeah.
Oh, right, the
It's
list.
right, where I changed references to them.
Well, the right way to do it was not.
It's in the big list at the end of changes, so it is.
It's on.
It's in section 6, okay.
It should be.
Okay,
So. I can do that, I can amend that. So. Cool.
Okay.
And
on that.
Actually, 4082 is in the bill, so
Yeah.
it's not. You referenced people don't know how to interact or participate with the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you ask the board or the department for the board's rules of procedure. They're not readily available online as far as I can find them, but they do have their own internal rules for how they operate. And I do believe that it includes provisions on public participation.
Okay, so procedure is not legally binding, but it is.
It's like Elkhart rules of procedure. You have to send your written testimony in by Tuesday before the Thursday.
Right.
Unless you get a waiver from a majority of the board, that kind of stuff.
So are you suggesting that we cite those rules or?
I think you should just look at them and see what and whether there's what they are and whether they're sufficient, in your opinion, to address the public concerns about public participation.
Could you, on behalf of the committee, request them from the department?
can I ask,
Certainly.
would that also include the petition piece, how they receive petitions, or is that something that all boards have a standard that they? Because it seems that people are bringing petitions and then they're not kind of sure when they're supposed to hear back or what the process for review is of those petitions. Would that be in the rules of procedure, or is that something else?
So the overarching requirements about petition are in the Administrative Procedure Act.
Okay. So they would have to adhere to those.
Right, and I just wanna be clear that an agency is not required to respond or do what it's petitioned for.
Yeah.
Because if they were, I don't even want to characterize. It would be chaos.
We have a different.
Is there any sort of acknowledgement of receipt, you know, like?
Yeah, I mean, I can read through the APA petition process.
Like the 25 or more?
Yeah, so that's it. And the agency has to. So there's a couple of different, you can request a declaratory ruling, you can request that a procedure be made a rule, and you can request that the agency adopt it. And so the person may submit a request to an agency asking the agency to adopt, amend, or repeal a procedure or rule within 30 days after receiving the request. The agency shall either initiate rulemaking, shall adopt, amend, or repeal the procedure, or shall deny the request, giving its reasons to the right.
In writing, okay. And what was the day count? Could you say the date?
30 days.
30 days. Okay, so when folks haven't heard back in like a year, that's actually not.
Already against.
Yeah, so they're already, okay.
Well,
That's a tough
and
one.
that was bill with rulemaking housed at the agency, then that's pretty straightforward.
Then they do it.
And not a mechanism, they're obligated to follow the APA.
But the board is currently obligated to follow this now.
I mean, that's the Administrative Procedure Act guides and sets requirements for all rulemaking.
Okay, so
Good to know.
it sounds as though they haven't been following APA. Very not.
So, Mr. Chair, the reason that we're having this discussion today is past events regarding what Mr. O'Brien, Mr. O'Reilly was just trying to explain to us. And the law called for the board to write rules on trapping near trails. And the law said 50 feet, I believe.
Yeah, well, the act said that they were directed to adopt setbacks. It didn't say it, but distance, but then the proposed rule said 50. But then it had an exclusion for traps set under water.
And a apparent lack of clarity on what constituted a trail that was subject to the rules, or what was a path that was not subject to the rules. And that is perhaps a fault of the legislature. Or not. And when it comes to coyote, the rule called for the law over coyote hunting and with dogs to require what's the word I'm looking for, control of the dogs. And the Elkhorn believed that those charged with making rules had failed to make a clear rule. And failures happen frequently amongst people of good faith trying to work with each other. Yeah, whether it's husbands and wives or people operating radar on the side of the road and the people driving the cars past the radar machines. And in those cases, the remedy is you go to court if you don't like what's happened. And Elkhorn has said that the rules, the above mentioned rules, haven't succeeded in being written or put in place, and it's gone forward.
Yeah.
And we'll hear from them what the result is. But there's that we're here because the rules that were written by folks who have the discretion to use different vocabulary words and different tones and different. This rule is this way because of these people's behavior, those people's behavior, all those things are discretionary. And the courts usually iron things out. If they don't, it goes back to us. That's where we are. Back to us. Because our job is to break the law that the rules are supposed to follow. And there's a lot of room in there for neighbors and people of goodwill to have different opinions about those rules. We have to have a system to settle those differences of opinion without calling each other names or any questioning each other's motives.
And that's, I think, the point of the bill right there.
Yeah, it's not easy. It was easy, we wouldn't be here.
So Mr. Grady, in terms of things that we're asking for your help on, I'm making a list as we go, so. Page 2, line 3, maybe some clarifying language there. In 4082, including or in some way making more explicit the existing broader statutory authority than people seem to appreciate, or maybe we don't need to change it, it's just fine, but we'll cite it and explain it. To request the procedure for the board's rules of procedure. To hear back from the department on the 4048D plan statutory requirement, what's the status of it, when was it last amended? And the bill anticipates that the commissioner would revise that, and that would be one of the rules that would go before this bill maybe a year from now. And I think that's the, and then we didn't really get into the definition of trail. And I can go back, would this include private land, public land? And I'd like to get a little more clarity on your interpretation of what our trail definition means. And if we can do that, if you have time now, and Senator, before we do that, Senator Watson?
Thank you. Two things. One is just as long as we're like flagging things for further work. The process of appointing people to the board. I just want to flag that I think it's a little messy in terms of like if you're having 5, 5, and 5 people appointed by different entities. And then they're also supposed to have one from each county. Like who gets which county? Like it's not clear to me how to mesh the. I appreciate the attempt to keep one per county, but I don't know how to marry that with this idea of 5, 5, and 5. So I just want to flag that as like I don't know how to think about it.
So you could look at examples from other states and it can get to the level of like, and the governor shall appoint somebody from Portsmouth north of the road.
Right.
And
New Hampshire one.
And
it's
you could just say the governor appoints from Chitten, Madison, Franklin.
Right.
Right. And so that would address that. And then you could specify who appoints the non-county.
Mm-hmm.
As well.
And then the other thing this is something that I just I don't feel like we necessarily have time to talk about it right now. We're also like waiting. Like a lot of people are still waiting to testify. So I also assume that this is not the last time that we will have Mr. Grady in.
No.
Okay.
Sure.
All of the pieces in section 10 that are like to repeal fish and wildlife regulations and trapping. I know, like I remember going through that and talking about like what it was, but I think I need to go over it. Like I think I'm just not clear.
I think you probably want a copy of the rule that, and it's not online yet. Well, it's not on the Vermont General Assembly.
My concern is like I understand that there was some concern about that whatever the rule is not conforming with the that's contrary to the intent. That's fair. So I'm just wondering with the mechanics of like if you're repealing this or replacing it with something else, or is it just leaving a void? Like what I'm just not unclear as to what is doing to repeal that.
Well, I can make it very, very clear. By going in and actually amending the rule.
Okay.
With it through the bill, which you have done in the past. Because when you created the rules in 1961, you gave yourself the authority to amend them.
Okay.
And so I just didn't do that. I did it a different way.
Okay.
It'll make the bill longer, but probably not that much longer.
Okay.
I can go in and show you and just do the amendments. And
Okay, right, so I don't know if you have sort of, as a writer of law, if you have a preference for which way to handle it. I mean, before asking you to do that, I wonder if you could send the committee a copy of the current rules, because I did notice when I went online to pull it up, it's not there yet. So maybe if we lay that rule next to this, then it will become transparent. If it's not transparent enough, then we'll take the slightly more verbose route of importing stuff and repealing it.
so me, I send, I don't have it here with me. It was the department's letter back to Elcar saying that they were not going to respond to the objections and then presenting the rule that they were going to file. I that's what I've been using, because it has the objections right on like the first page or two. And then it has what the text is going to look like. I can send that to the committee.
If you can send that, the committee will post it and get a copy. I think, Jude, when it comes in, can you print a hard copy for everyone? Thank you. All right. Any other questions for,
You don't know, you had a question and I don't know if I answered it.
a lot of questions. Did I not bring it up today? I was looking at my email to you.
It was right before Senator Watson asked for questions.
Oh, trails, definition of trails, how expansive is that definition? Some people have asked, like, what will it sweep up?
Currently it's written in a very expensive way. And it would include, in my opinion, anything on public or private land. Remember, well, I guess this is still something that is of debate, but trappers can go onto the land of others. They're required to seek permission.
Does seek permission mean get permission, or file a letter saying write someone a letter, I'd like to trap your property, you can just go.
I think the statute does seek permission, and I think the agency or department recommends that they actually get permission.
Okay, so seek is a little different than obtain. Okay.
So, there are ways to address the concerns about expansiveness. Using a model already in the state is like, you're allowed to hunt on your land.
Unless posted.
Unless on your own land.
Oh, on your own land.
Even if it is posted.
Sure, okay.
Correct. Because it's your land. The posting is to keep other people off of here.
Tim McCormick.
Would you review for me? We discussed last year, maybe it was the year before. About posting. If you want to keep people off your land, posted, if you're silent on them, then the fallback refers to the right of a person to go on your land. The person can go on your land without permission unless he's posted.
So the Constitution says a person has a right to hunt, fish, or fowl on land. Let me just.
Not enclosed.
Not enclosed, and unless the General Assembly provides other. And so. So what?
Commissioner Harris argued that we should not require otherwise, because we essentially be what we were posting all the minutes. He said, that means in effect for coast. Understand.
What?
Commissioner Harris.
Right.
Argued that if we required permission to trap, that we would in essence be hosting the entire state.
who already required permission.
I didn't buy the argument, that was, and what I'm asking for is where do we finally come down on
Well, I can't tell you you're gonna come down. But this is the Constitution. The inhabitants of the state shall have liberty and seasonable time, hunt and fowl on the lands they hold, and on other lands not enclosed. And in like manner to fish in all boatable and other waters, not private property. The proper regulations be made and provided by the general assembly. And as to the permission for trapping. Hold on a second. Some further bearing.
Well, I'm sorry if I threw you a curve.
I'm just gonna have to find it.
That argument threw me. I got it. And I later decided he was wrong, but it was too late. But what I was asking you is, just, well, how did we come down? The law now is that you do need permission.
Yeah.
To trap on someone else's land.
Yeah. I'm not.
We can flag it and come back.
Wait.
But I do know they peculiar, like seeking permission as opposed to needing.
So here it is. The person who intends to set a trap for any animal on the property of another shall, prior to setting the trap, notify the owner of the property of his or her intention to set the trap. And with respect to the location of the trap, the owner of the property may at any time refuse to grant permission to set the trap. Provisions.
And that is existing.
I did not exist as well.
Okay, so notification doesn't have any requirement of acknowledgement and permission.
No.
Okay. All right, so we got into this by talking about.
But wait. It says you notified, but it says the owner can say no.
Right.
So there is permission built into this. It's just permission after notice, it's not.
If you notified but heard nothing back, is that tacit approval?
Yes.
The default is.
So it's on the landowner to speak up after notification. Okay. All right. Was more to this than, so we got into this territory by talking about how expansive or limited the definition of trail.
It's expansive, it was, during the Elkhart rulemaking process, there were advocates that proposed the use of effectively what is used in New Hampshire, Massachusetts. And what those two states says is you can't place a trap in a public right of way. And or any place where it is expected that a person could recreate effectively. And so that is not exactly what the definition of trail in this language is. I worked with those two states' definitions to come up with what is a trail. But it is consistent with what was proposed in that it is broad. It's a path or corridor open to the public or any other area. The persons may reasonably be expected to recreate in all areas for non-motorized recreation purposes. That's broad.
So thank you, and So that would apply to, there's a, for instance, there's a trail much used near where I live, non-private property, but it, dozens of people walk there every day.
It's a vast trail.
Well, the question of vast trails came up as well. This one's a hiking trail, but yeah, so vast or hiking, even if they're on private property, that would be treated as a trail in the bill, and then there would the setback of 50 feet would apply to that situation as well. So, okay. I think there was also a question came up about roads, because people end up using roads as de facto trails sometimes.
Yeah, I raised that question, because right now, the setback is for class 4 roads, but it doesn't say highways.
Huh.
And so you could clarify that and put out a cross-reference to the definition of highway.
These highways are public rights of way. Yeah, okay, so if we could add. That's agreement, having a scale. Should have right to say and date. Okay. Thank you. Right, anything else we would like to ask council as we move towards markup next week? Okay, thank you for your help this morning. Well, the committee, we have been going 2 hours straight, so let's take a break till 10:30. That gives us an hour and a half left. We have roughly 15 more witnesses, so the timing should work out to fine. Thank you everyone for 2 hours.
Is going more than 2 hours against the rule or against custom
Well,
or against tradition?
10:30, sorry.